So the topic for this evening's live event is called Happiness in Yoga. And when we speak about happiness in general, of course, we have this tendency, if I speak about most people on this planet, we have this tendency to define happiness according to our desires. We have this tendency to define happiness according to our beliefs from childhood or as we grow up. And usually if I ask, let's say, a random person from the street, what does it mean to become happy, or how would you define happiness? Then, of course, some people will say, well, for me, to be happy means to have a lot of money. If I will have a lot of money, then basically I can do what I want, right? I can buy myself a nice big house. I can go to a 5-star hotel. I can travel. I can buy myself a new car. And then, for sure, I will be happy. Other people will say, well, actually, the way that I would define happiness is, in order to be happy, one should have a family, or one should have some children, right? And if I will have a family and I'll have safety and security and everything revolving around this, then I will be happy. And other people will say, no, actually, to be happy, it means to have the perfect relationship. If I will find the most perfect, compatible partner, life partner, then I will be happy, and I will live, as the legends say, happily ever after. But the sad reality is, unfortunately, is that we can see, and some of you probably had your life experience that will confirm what I'm about to say, that we sadly see that actually all these things that I've mentioned, money and children and having partners and all these things, are actually not necessarily give you complete happiness. It gives you a kind of a momentarily happiness. We have certain highs in which, for example, we meet a new partner, or we get a new car, or we get the new iPhone or something like this. We think that we are happy for a while, and indeed, it seems like this is what is happening internally, because we feel emotionally, mentally elated. But unfortunately, after a while, it decreases, and then we are realizing that actually this object that we thought that is going to make us happy didn't. And of course, the question is, what's next? Like, what is indeed happiness? Because from the standpoint of yoga, the yogis, and I'm speaking about the yogis of Tibet, of India, I'm speaking about men and women which dedicated their whole life to spend hours and days and months and years of daily practice in meditation, hatha yoga, and going into high states of consciousness and states of samadhi. These yogis, they analyzed the nature of the mind. They first of all analyzed the nature of their own mind, and they realized that actually all these things which I've mentioned, family and children and money and all these things, are indeed nothing else but a definition of the mind, certain kind of classification of the mind of what happiness is. Even today, for example, something which is very popular is this kind of internet shopping. A lot of people go to the internet, to Amazon or whatever it is, and they think, oh, there's a lot of things that we can buy or purchase. And if, oh, I saw a really cool phone, I saw a really cool gadget, or I saw really cool shoes or something like this, and then you buy them, and then you get them after a few days. Again, there is this magic of the beginning, but after a few days or after 2 weeks or something like this, it's just another phone. It's just another pair of shoes. It's just another this or that. And then again, you are back to square one. And the question is, how should one become happy? So the yogis of India and Tibet, they were aware of it, and they realized that the problem begins at the level of the human mind, that it is our mind which unfortunately is constructed in such a way that we can divide our mind into two, plus and minus, pleasant or unpleasant, or perhaps the one which is really important, past and future. That means even from the standpoint of yoga, when we speak about the structure of the chakras, some of you are familiar with this knowledge, others perhaps one day you will join our regular yoga courses and you will learn more about this. But when we speak about the chakras, we classify 7 chakras, 7 main chakras or centers of energy in the human being. And we say that the first six chakras, up until the level of the third eye, they have a certain kind of polarity, a duality of plus and minus. And especially when we speak about the level of the mind, then this polarity of plus and minus, indeed, one of the ways of classifying it will be the polarity of plus and minus. Our mind, the way that we think usually, is going in such a way that we usually either think about things which happened in the past, like, for example, some people will say, yesterday I saw a really cool movie, or 2 weeks ago I had a really bad argument with my partner, or when I remember when I was a child, I had this or that type of experience. Or on the other hand, our mind is usually thrown into the future, in the meaning that we always think like, what will happen tomorrow? Am I going to make more money tomorrow or next year? Am I going to find magically my perfect partner? Am I going to do this and that? And sometimes we even go into this direction of building all kinds of castles in the air, allowing our imagination to go freely into different directions, which is actually useless. It is not a constructive thinking, like creative planning. We are going to do this and this and this, and then we are going to accomplish what we want. This would be more like a creative use of the mind in order to accomplish certain goals. But most people, because unfortunately they do not control their mind, they allow their mind and their imagination to swarm freely, and unfortunately it's simply a waste of time. It's a waste of time, and people do it a lot these days. So coming back to what I've mentioned, what is happiness according to yoga? As I told you, modern average people will define happiness according to their level of mind, desires, and stuff like this. And we understood already that this is actually something which doesn't necessarily gives you constant happiness. So speaking about this polarity of plus, minus, and past and future, the yogis simply realize that as long as we live at the level of the mind, as long as we allow ourselves to be thrown back and forth between the past and the future, we will never be happy. We will never be content. And this word contentment is actually the word which the yogis prefer to use when they speak about something which is equivalent to what in modern time will be defined as happiness. The yogis will say the following thing: to truly cultivate contentment, not just that you will be happy once in a while, because this is something momentarily. Today, for example, maybe it is raining and the sky is gray, and then some people get depressed out of it. Why should you get depressed just because there is no sunshine, or it's raining, or maybe you've been sacked in your job, or you're going through something like this? So the yogis looked at it in the following way, and they say, what is the definition of contentment? The definition of contentment would be actually to transcend your mind, to transcend above this polarity of past and future, and go to what we call the level of the pure consciousness, which in the yogic terminology refers to the highest level of energy, to the highest level of consciousness, to the 7th chakra, which is called the crown chakra. And this is the special thing about the crown chakra, is that the crown chakra transcends polarity. There is no more polarity of plus and minus at the level of the crown chakra, because here we are speaking about pure consciousness, pure awareness, being in the present moment, having this kind of awareness in which one simply states in his mind, or it's a kind of a remembrance in a way, in which you simply say, I am. And this awareness, this consciousness, is actually the key, the main key, according to the yogis, for cultivating contentment. Because they will say the following thing: how shall you be happy? How will you become happy? As long as you live at the level of the mind. Because as long as you live at the level of the mind, there will always be plus and minus. This whole reality is made of plus, minus. Rain and sunshine, good days, bad days, darkness and light, and the list goes on and on. And of course, this is something which we all know from our own personal life, that some days, because of certain circumstances, we can be more in a good mood and happy because whatever, the sun is shining, or we got a little bit more money, or because we got the new iPhone or something like this. And other days, because of different circumstances, different conditions, then unfortunately we become unhappy. So the yogis look at it and they said the following thing: if one can actually learn and realize how to transcend the mind and to make it more clear how to live in the present moment, how to be in the present moment, one will truly learn how to be content regardless of what the day brings. Because if you are transcending your mind, you are not anymore allowing your mind to be thrown into the past and to the future, then how shall you become unhappy? Because, this is just my own mind. The yogis say we are not the mind. We have something which is superior to the mind, which is called consciousness. So if one can reach to the level of transcending the mind, one can actually be content almost 24/7. And of course, some people will say it sounds like, pretty cheap philosophy, like we can find today very much in India, in other places in Asia, or even in the West. You can see all kind of motivational speakers or movies speaking about cultivating positive thinking and positive thoughts. But actually, according to the yogis, this is not just mere philosophy or some kind of speculation like, oh, just be in the present moment, carpe diem, seize the day and stuff like this. But they offer concrete exercises of how to cultivate this ability. And perhaps the most famous modern spiritual speaker, which has been speaking about this quite a lot, is the famous Eckhart Tolle, which wrote this famous bestseller book 20 years ago called The Power of Now. This Eckhart Tolle, by some special circumstances, realized at some point in his life that indeed inside of him there were like two different types of mechanisms. On one hand, there was this monkey mind of his, which being kept thrown between the past and the future, giving him negative thoughts, giving him some positive sometimes. Unfortunately for him, because of his depressive temperament and nature, it was most of the time negative thoughts. That's why he was a bit more of the suicidal type of person. And he confesses it. He admits to it when he wrote this book. And then he realized there was another part of his being, which was indeed this consciousness, this pure awareness. And then at a certain point in his life, he simply had this abrupt, spontaneous realization. He entered into a state of samadhi, and he basically from that point became an enlightened being. And this Eckhart Tolle, in his book, he tried to convey this kind of truth of living in the present moment, just like the yogis define their way of happiness in the form of contentment. He even gives exercises, such, for example, how should one be in the present moment? Because it's something which is very difficult, right? If I'm going to tell you right now, let's do a certain exercise for the next 5 minutes, I want you to sit quietly, even close your eyes, and don't think about anything. Don't allow your mind to go into the past or to the future. Just be into the present moment. You are going to see that while in the beginning it sounds like a very simple, banal exercise, what's the big deal of just sitting down and not thinking about anything? You are going to see actually that it is a big deal. It is very challenging. And most people already after 20, 30 seconds, they notice that their mind has a will of its own. Suddenly after 20, 30 seconds, you start thinking about shopping, or you start thinking about food, or you start thinking about movies or something like this. And then suddenly you catch yourself in the middle of this process and you say, wait a second, the purpose of this exercise was being in the present moment. So what is happening in my own mind? And then you start again, okay, I'm not going to think about anything. And then again, after 20, 30 seconds, this whole drama in your mind starts. So Eckhart Tolle and the yogis, they recommend certain exercises which you can do in your daily life to increase more and more this period of duration in which one can transcend the mind and be in the present moment. Such, for example, I'll give 2 or 3 simple examples. For example, when you are walking usually, and either it is when you are walking out of your house, or you're walking in the street, or you walk to do some shopping or something like this, Question is, what is happening in your mind? The answer is, your mind simply goes into different directions, right? You are walking, but you're not really paying attention to your walking. You're not in the present moment. And then you think about yesterday, you think about tomorrow, I'm going to do this and that. And just like this, you spend 10 minutes doing nothing with your mind. And what Eckhart Tolle recommends is the following. When you walk, the next time you walk, this is something which can be done at any point during the day. You simply pay attention. You try to be conscious of the present moment, which means every single step that you are taking, you try to be aware. You try to be consciousness without allowing your mind to take you into different directions. And the more and more you do such an exercise, it will more and more energize your crown chakra. It helps you transcend your mind, and it can give you contentment. Because how will you be depressed, or how will you have negative thoughts if you are not at the level of the mind? Because you have surpassed your mind, you have transcended your mind, and you're just at the present moment. So this is one exercise which anyone can do. Another exercise, for example, of cultivating this awareness would be at the time of eating food. Most people, when they eat food, like you made yourself a delicious salad or whatever, and then you take the first bite, you put it in your mouth, and there is some small awareness, consciousness there, because you enjoy the first bite, right? You enjoy the taste and everything, and you say, wow, this is really delicious. But then what comes usually after is that when you take the second bite and the third bite and so forth, you don't pay attention to how you eat. And then you talk to your friend, or you watch a movie, or you do something else, and then your mind continuously go into different directions, and you're not 100% there. Your mind takes control, your desires takes control, but your consciousness, your awareness is not there. Not to mention that, of course, this can be very unhealthy, because if you just keep on binging food, you're not allowing yourself to chew the food properly, which means also that you are not going to have proper digestion, and not to mention that it is not really a total enjoyment of eating the food or drinking, for example, a glass of wine. You know, you see the French, when they drink a glass of wine or when they eat food, they enjoy it very much. It's a kind of an art for the French, while other people, when they eat food or when they drink, it's just like an animal kind of thing, and there is no awareness there. There is no attention whatsoever. So these are just, I could continue on and on, but of course I want to mention other things related to this topic. But this will be one thing, or two exercises in which one can cultivate awareness and consciousness. What else can we describe from the yogic point of view? How can one cultivate contentment and increase it as time progresses? One very important element, and this is something which comes mostly from the Tantric tradition, and as you know, when we speak about Tantra, we speak mainly about energy, we speak about Shakti, is the following, that the yogis have noticed, again, by doing their practice and understanding the connection between the human being and the universe, they simply realized that all of our negative emotions, whichever negative emotion that you can think of, depression, jealousy, sexual frustration, anything which is negative in the human being, is actually nothing else but a certain emotion or a state of mind which is being fed by a certain energy from the first three chakras, from the lower chakras or centers of energies in the human being. Which means, in other words, as long as you have a lot of energy in your lower chakras, most likely you will have negative thoughts. You will be depressed, you will feel jealousy, you will feel confused, and things similar to that. Well, what would be the tantric solution for such a problem? The solution would be what is called the sublimation of the lower emotions, or the sublimation of the lower energies. And the result of this sublimation, there is a whole description of it which we make in our regular yoga courses. I'm not going to get into that now. If any one of you want to go deeper into that, because it's a revolutionary, transformative type of teaching which can change your life a lot. But anyhow, the sublimation of the lower emotions means that by a certain internal process, a human being can actually convert, can sublime, can transform his lower energies and lower emotions into more higher refined energies, into more superior emotion states of minds, or we can say positive emotions or states of mind. Which means if I'm right now depressed, the reason why I'm depressed according to the yogic tradition is because I have a certain sexual energy, a certain heavy energy in my lower chakras. And the simple way to get out of this depression would be to sublime this energy, to flush it upward, and then the negativity cannot reside if I continue with this sublimation. In our regular yoga courses, we teach our students different yogic techniques of how to sublime the energy. But now, because I know that some of you perhaps are not so much from our regular yoga courses and you would want something more basic, some more daily type of activities which might help you to increase your sublimation, then I can give you the following advice. The yogis, by doing their practice, they realized actually that among the 7 different certain centers of energies or chakras in the human being, there is one chakra which is considered to be the number 1 chakra in the human being, which governs this sublimation process, which means that if you can manage to activate this chakra, that would mean that the sublimation process will start happening more naturally within you. This chakra, according to the yogis, is Manipur Chakra, or to be more specific, the navel chakra, where your belly button is. This navel chakra corresponds to the fire element. And why do they say that this chakra is the number 1 chakra, corresponds to the sublimation process? Because they say if we take more the lower energies from the first 2 chakras, these energies, they are very heavy. And if this energy is not moving, it is not flushed upward, it can become stagnated, it can become very heavy, and it is this type of energy which is feeding up all your negative emotions. Well, how to take this energy upward and sublime it? You need to have a certain kind of an internal fire, an internal furnace, which will help you to take these heavy energies, burn them, dematerialize them, and then through this process, it will be much more easier for the energies to flare upwards, to move upward, to go into the higher chakras. But the question is, how can one activate or energize more this Manipura chakra, this navel chakra? How can one accumulate more fire? Let me give you some very simple daily activities that one can perform. We mentioned Manipura chakra corresponds to the fire element, which would means, in other words, exposing yourself more to fire energy will enhance your internal fire. So, for example, the number 1 source of energy in this universe which relates to fire is the sun, which means, in other words, you want to have more internal fire. Where will you get it from? You should get it, first of all, from the sun, which means that it would be very advisable from the yogis that from time to time, why not even on a daily basis, you should go outside in front of the sunshine, if possible, even removing your clothes. So you'll be completely naked or whatever, if there are people around you, at least wearing a bathing suit, and expose your body to the sun. Not perhaps too long, because maybe some people will have all kinds of fears that if you expose yourself to the sun too much, you will have skin problems, you'll have cancer, you'll have this or that. But even 30 minutes per day will simply charge your aura with a lot of this type of energy, and this will be excellent for your Manipura chakra. And you will start feeling more fire, and in this way, it will help a lot your sublimation. Some people will say, but wait a second, I'm a very busy person. During the whole week, I'm working, and I don't even have 5 minutes to go and spend time under the sun, right? What about the weekend? If you are busy during the week, why not, for example, take Saturday or Sunday and go a little bit to the beach or somewhere and take off your clothes and spend some time lying down under the sun. So this is one example. Another example of cultivating more this internal fire will be, for example, changing your diet. Like, for example, the macrobiotic diets. If any one of you is not familiar with macrobiotics, then just for your general information, macrobiotics has been developed somewhere in the middle of the 20th century by a Japanese fellow called George Oshawa. And this Giorgio Shava, he was not a yogi, he was just a very enthusiastic Asian fellow which was interested in learning more and more about the connection between energy and food. And this Giorgio Shava simply started doing all kinds of experiments. He tasted different items of food, drinks, and other elements, and he simply reached the conclusion that some food can either charge you with an energy which is more solar, which would mean more beneficial for your Manipura chakra, giving you more fire, and other items of food, on the contrary, will make you more lunar, more receptive, and that's the opposite of what we are speaking of. And in connection to this, the yogis embraced, they adopted the teachings and the science of Giorgio Shava, and they realized there is a very strong connection between what you eat and how do you behave, what is the content of your emotions and thoughts, simply because the food that you eat is charging you with energy. And it's not surprising to see that the more people eat food, like all this, especially this junk food, McDonald's and pizzas, and having all this kind of drinks which are making your aura more lunar and more receptive, also it makes sense that they will start feeling more depressed, more negative, and more unhappy. But if you dive a little bit into the teachings of Giorgio Shava, you can find books of Giorgio Shava, and you start changing your diet, you start balancing your diet, you are going to start noticing that actually you are becoming, first of all, much more light, you are starting to become much more solar, and yes, also your internal fire, your Manipura chakra becomes stronger, which will be valuable for subliming this lower emotions. In connection, by the way, to what I've mentioned before about exposing yourself to the sun, some people will say, but what if, for example, I'm living in a place in which it's pretty cold? Why not? In Europe right now, it's winter time, so you don't get a lot of sun. What else can we do? Well, if you cannot go and lie down under the sun, you can, for example, start a bonfire. If you go to some field or somewhere in the forest, well, of course, you're not disturbing anyone, and you take all the safety precautions, you can start a bonfire. And then you can simply remove your clothes and expose yourself to the fire. This can be very intense. This can have a very intense effect on your aura, and you're going to feel a lot of energy in your Manipura chakra, which can help your sublimation. If you don't want to go into the direction of bonfire, you can even light a candle in your home apartment. And why not sit in front of the candle, meditate in front of the candle, and just by having this energy which emanates from the fire of the candle, it can have a direct effect, especially if you add some concentration at the level of your navel chakra, at the level of your Manipura chakra. So I mentioned exposing yourself to fire. I mentioned the sun. I've mentioned this changing the diet. This is something which, of course, we can elaborate much more, but we don't have time here, about macrobiotics. And the third activity, which again anybody can do, which can help to develop a little bit your internal fire, will be simply doing more dynamic activities, simply going into the direction of doing some kind of sports. Like, for example, if you are doing jogging, anybody knows that when you jog, you start feeling more active, you start feeling more dynamic, which means, in other words, your internal fire, your Manipura chakra, enhances. When you go swimming, even though it is more associated with water, nevertheless, when you are swimming, it is again a more of a dynamic activity. And why not even practicing martial arts, which is excellent for developing Manipura chakra, because martial arts, the practice of martial arts coming from Asia, and it is in nature, has a lot in resonance with Manipura chakra. So all these activities, they will definitely help a lot to make you more dynamic, more active, and they can enhance a lot your sublimation. And the more and more you can manage to sublime these lower, heavy, negative energies and emotions, the more and more you can develop contentment. And this would be the equivalent of what we can call cultivating happiness in yoga. Of course, when we speak about these activities, we can number other activities which we do during our daily life, which can determine whether we feel more content or happy, or on the other hand, we start feeling more depressive or negative. Such as, for example, the environment that you are surrounding yourself with. Like, for example, ask yourself, what kind of friends do you associate with? Are these friends resonating with a certain energy which is more positive or negative? Like, for example, somebody might say, you know what, I am actually practicing yoga every day for 1 hour. But at the same time, I feel still quite depressive. I feel negative. Then I will ask such a person, okay, you do 1 hour of yoga per day. Wonderful. It would be fantastic if every person on this planet will do 1 hour of yoga per day. It will be a completely different planet. But my question to this person will be, what do you do during the rest of the day? Because yoga is not just being done on the yoga mat. Yoga is related to what you do during your whole day. So if you are telling me, for example, I have a friend or a group of best friends, which I meet them quite on a regular basis, but I have to admit that these friends, they're actually quite depressive. They are quite negative. Well, it's a matter of resonance. If you talk to such people and you spend hours and hours with such people, then for sure you're going to accumulate some of this negativity in your aura. Or why not? Let's speak about something which is very popular these days, and that is all these kind of streaming services like Netflix, or why not just watching movies on the internet. And again, I could ask a person which like to watch movies, and there's nothing wrong with watching movies according to Tantra, because in Tantra you can mix yoga and boga, you can mix discipline, yoga practice with pleasures. But I will ask this kind of person, what kind of movies are you watching? Are these movies projecting or resonating with an energy which is more positive or negative? Some people, they like to go into and watching all kind of TV shows and movies which are more depressive or more dark or more negative. And especially if you watch hours and hours of these TV movies and stuff like this, then of course it will reflect in your aura. And some people, they don't even pay attention to this. They do it somehow like this, and they say, what's the big deal of listening to a music or listening to the songs of Frank Sinatra or listening to the songs of this or that? There is a certain energy in that. And if, for example, you have a favorite singer or a band and their songs are continuously projecting this depressive energy, it will reflect in your aura. And that if you add all these things together, you change to you make sure that you're not listening to too much depressive music. You're not watching too much depressive movies. You are doing, why not, your yoga practice. You are doing these exercises which I've mentioned. You are substituting these negative resonances with more positive ones. Like instead of watching some negative dark movie, you are watching some kind of an inspiring satsang or a lecture on YouTube. Then, for example, you'll feel much more positive because it's a matter of resonance. And the last thing which I want to mention, one more exercise which can be done, is working directly with the mind. If we say that the cause of unhappiness for humanity starts from the level of the mind, this polarity, past and future, pleasure, displeasure, and everything related to this, then why not working directly with the mind? And here you can find the wonderful teachings which are not coming only from the yoga tradition, but for example, you can find some modern teachers which have been speaking about this a lot. You can find this whole teaching about the yoga of the mind, like how to work directly with the mind or with the subconscious mind, in which you would be able actually to make yourself more happy, more content, just by working directly with your mind. And perhaps the best book which have been written about this topic was a book written somewhere in the 1960s by Dr. Joseph Murphy, which is called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. This book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, is an excellent book for learning how to cultivate contentment and bringing more happiness into your life. Because in this book, this Dr. Joseph Murphy have simply realized that the problem of most people, either it is physical pain or emotional pain or anything related to this, starts at the level of the mind. And if one can actually learn how to work directly with the subconscious mind by applying certain self-suggestions, then one can actually achieve whatever one wants. Like, for example, one of the very famous self-suggestion techniques or mantras which have been used in the 20th century was the one of Emile Coué, which was called Every Day and in Every Way, I can make my life better and better, or every day in every way, I am getting better and better yet. If one repeats, and this Emile Coué experimented with this, just like this Dr. Joseph Murphy, which had many patients, they have experimented with this and they noticed spectacular results, that human beings, by doing the self-suggestion, and you have to do it by applying certain laws. So it's not like this book which have been written recently called The Secret, which is giving a very simplified explanation, just think positive or think about whatever you want and it will come to you. There's more to that. You have to study properly the laws of the mind, and why not read this book of Joseph Murphy, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, and then you will see that there are actually certain rules or certain laws which have to be followed, and then only indeed you can change how you think. Because some people will say, for example, oh, if I want to think positive, and let's say my biggest problem is that I constantly feel fear, then in order to change my mind, I should simply repeat myself as a kind of a mantra, as a self-suggestion, like, I don't feel fear, I don't feel fear. But actually, when you say it like this, the only word which is left in your mind, in your subconscious mind, is fear. And then what you get is the opposite thing. You start feeling more and more fear, and you got the opposite of what you're planning to get, which is actually you wanted more courage. So there are certain rules, certain laws which needs to be followed. And all these exercises which I've mentioned, they require persistence, they required patience, and they require discipline. And here we get to the last thing which I want to mention, and that is the fact that a lot of people, they might listen to such a lecture which I'm giving you right now, or they might read a book of Eckhart Tolle or Joseph Murphy, or attend some seminar or yoga course, and the teacher will say something similar to what I've just mentioned now, and you have the motivation boost or the motivation injection, and you start doing the exercise. You say, right, I want to be more happy, I want to be more content and whatever. You do it for 1 day, you do it for 2 days, you do it for 1 week, and then at a certain point, because of this repetition, there will be a certain voice in your mind which will say, you know what, this is too much. We've been doing this exercise for the last week. Today, let's take just a break, and I just want to rest today. Or your mind will tell you, you know what, I've been doing this for 1 week, and I don't really feel any kind of results. And what's the point of this? Let's just, it would be better just to lie down on the couch and watch some television or something like this. This tendency of our mind to forget has been defined by the yogis. And if you want to even look at this point from the tantric point of view, if you look, for example, at this statue behind me, where is it? This direction, over there. So if you look at this statue here, which you see, this is the statue of Shiva Nataraj, Shiva the dancer. If you look below Shiva, which is dancing, you see that there is a little fellow there lying down. This little fellow is called by the Indian Hinduism, by Tantra, it's called Apasmara Purusha. And this little fellow there is actually a dwarf, a demon, which represents the energy of forgetfulness. It represents the energy of laziness, and it represents the energy of basically doing nothing, being lazy. And this is nothing else but a symbolic representation of the human being. On one hand, we have what we call this consciousness, this pure awareness, which gives us the ability to actually transcend our animal instinct and nature. And on the other hand, we have our own internal Apasmara Purusha, this internal little demon or dwarf, which just wants to forget, which wants to lie down and nothing. And in this image that you see there, Shiva steps on this demon. He steps on it because he doesn't want to allow this demon to take over. And in the same way, we as human beings, if we want to evolve, we have to step on this animal nature of ours. Of course, not necessarily continuously. You're not supposed to transform in 1 day from whatever, doing just 5 minutes of yoga to do 8 hours of yoga or some of these exercises which I mentioned. But you can do it gradually. And even if indeed you start doing some of these exercises and there is this little voice in your head which says, let's forget about this stupid thing, let's just lie down and do nothing, then you say no. You just step on it and you say, I have committed that I want to transform, to change myself, and that is why I am going to persist. And I'm going to persist every day until I'm going to start noticing considerable results. And in this way, I would be able to cultivate contentment. I would be able to cultivate happiness. And it is something which I know is coming internally for me. I am not dependent on external objects that will define my happiness. Oh, today it is sunshine, so I can be happy. But if it is raining today, on the other hand, then I feel depressed and moody. This is nothing else but what the yogis call Maya. This is nothing else but the manifestation doing its dance. But we have our consciousness. We have the ability, just like the Shiva, the dancer, to stomp on this animal instinct of ours and have the ability to persist, to go deeper and deeper and accomplish whatever it is that we want. So this is what I want to say. Of course, a very brief summary of the yogic point of view of what happiness or contentment is. And let's see right now if there are any questions. I will look here and see what are questions, and then we can talk a little bit. So I have here the first question, which is being asked by Penelope. So I don't know myself a person called Penelope, but I welcome you to this event, and let's see what is your question. What if you try to be in the present moment while walking, eating, but you get angry because you don't succeed? And you even feel scared, like your mind will explode. What should you do in this case? Well, this is actually something very common. It's a good question. What you described here is a very common problem that a lot of people encounter when they start doing such exercises, such as you mentioned, getting angry because you don't succeed. You have to understand that the reason why you get angry is nothing else because of your own mind. The mind, our mind, is built in such a way that our mind is like a puppy that all the time wants to play. You know, if you observe puppies, puppies are very restless. They all the time want to move and jump and play and all the time like this. And as soon as you start doing some of these exercises, it's like you're trying to put reins over your own mind, over your own little puppy. And when you start doing this process, your mind becomes very angry because your mind is used to entertainment. Your mind is used to all kind of distractions and agitations. And suddenly you say, no, we are going to do this exercise. And then especially if you do it more and more, your mind will become even more agitated, and it will even might reflect in the form of anger. You start getting angry because you don't see results. Well, this is exactly the trap which is related to the mind. And what the yogis would usually recommend would be the following two things. One would be patience. That means even if you feel angry, just be patient, because eventually this anger is coming from your own mind, which means that the more and more you do this practice, the more and more you will start gaining control over your mind. You can even transcend your mind, and then the anger will disappear, because how can you feel anger if you are above your mind? And the second thing is to be detached, which means, in other words, you have taken the decision to do the exercise. You say to yourself, I'm going to do this exercise every day for 10 minutes for the next 3 weeks, regardless of the results. Maybe after 3 weeks, the results will be spectacular and I will have this or that effect. Or maybe after 3 weeks, the results will be minimal. Nevertheless, I'm not going to allow my mind to take over and make me give up in the middle of the practice. I'm going to be detached. That means if I succeed, good. If I didn't succeed, it's also good, because these 3 weeks, I didn't waste my time. For these 3 weeks, every day for 10 minutes, I did some concrete exercise. I didn't just sit in front of the TV or in front of the computer and did this or that. For 10 minutes, I actually tried to take action, to take control over myself and perform a certain exercise which can transform myself. And you said here also you might feel scared, like your mind will explode. What should you do in this case? Again, this feeling of having fear or scared, as you describe it, it is something which comes from the level of the mind. And this fear usually comes because we have this tendency very much to identify ourselves with our own mind or with our own ego. And in any kind of exercise that you do, not only the ones which I described, but in any kind of exercise that you do in which you try to actually move your energy and go higher and higher, it's an exercise which can definitely be frightening. It is frightening simply because your ego is afraid of it. We are used to be at the level of the ego and say, this is my body, and this is my apartment, and this is my boyfriend or my girlfriend, whatever. And then as soon as I start going higher and higher, it feels a little bit like I'm stepping out of my body, or even as you describe it here, like your mind is going to explode. What should you do in this case? It would be good to persist. That means even if you feel fear, it is good to confront your fear, because a lot of people nowadays, they are having a little bit of this soft, flabby lifestyle, which is like, as soon as I start feeling something a little bit unpleasant, or as soon as I start feeling a little bit fear, I'm simply giving up. It's too much, which is not necessarily the right kind of attitude if you want to become stronger, if you want to develop a certain kind of internal strength and internal power. So that's why if you are encountering such things, it's good to struggle, it's good to persist to a certain measure, in the meaning that each and every one of you has a certain red line, which means if you start doing an exercise and okay, you feel a little bit angry, or you feel a little bit scared, or you feel a little bit unpleasant, but you feel it's something which you can control. You haven't yet crossed the red line. But if you feel after a certain amount of time that it's getting a bit too close to the red line, to your threshold, and you feel like, oh my God, I cannot continue anymore because indeed I feel like my mind is going to explode. What you do at this point is that you simply stop. You say, it's enough for today. I did what I could do today. I stop for today. I just take it easy. And tomorrow, after I have a good sleep and a good breakfast and everything, I start again. And then like this, you can actually push the red line further and further until you are going to see that after a few days, weeks, months, whatever, you can actually do this practice longer and longer. And there is no fear, there is no anger, there is nothing unpleasant, because you actually purified yourself from all these things. So I hope I answered your question properly. And let's see, the next question is coming from Dominique. And the question is, sometimes the work you do in daily life can be monotonous. How could I use this time for yoga practices? Again, I would advise very much to the person who asked this question to look a little bit into the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, because here in his book, he gives all kind of advices of how to use different tools and different exercises in the daily life to practice yoga. But coming directly to the question that you described here, and the fact that daily life can be monotonous, let's look at it in the following way. If I, for example, take my daily routine, as then you say here, indeed, it can become a certain monotonous. Even if you have a certain daily routine, nevertheless, you can find certain gaps in your day in which you can actually insert certain activities or exercises, which can definitely make your day much more productive in a spiritual way, such as, why not, the use of music. In our regular yoga courses, we speak a lot about the use of music in yoga, in meditation. But let's imagine that, for example, I have a daily routine that I work every day in the office from 9 to 5. And indeed, it can be pretty repetitive, boring, whatever. But for example, I have some breaks here and there, right? I have half an hour break, 10 minutes break, whatever. And again, even if you are eating because it's lunchtime, or even if you are doing something else, especially if you are alone and you're not distracted by somebody around you, you can, for example, take some music which is actually helping you, why not, to sublime your energy, or helping you, for example, to activate your heart chakra, or why not help you to activate your third eye. then you can put your earphones, so you're not disturbing anybody. You can close your eyes and listen to this music. I do it many times in my own daily routine, because sometimes, I go into the city, and in the city has an energy of its own. People are working, they have their frustration, they have their stress. And I have in my phone music which is very inspiring, which I've collected over the years, and I simply place it on my earphones. I go into my own little world and I play this music, and just by listening 5 or 10 minutes to this music, it can change my whole day. So why not use music? If it's not music, it can be something else. You can even go, and if you are more, because this method which I described maybe would be fitting more for auditory type of people. But what if, for example, you are more visual? Then why not even watch some more inspiring or motivational video clips which will boost your yoga practice? Or why not, for example, taking a certain spiritual book? Look at the books of Yogananda, of Shivananda, and others, great enlightened beings, and you just read a chapter of this book for 5 minutes. It can change your life a lot. I remember personally, some long time ago, when I had a job before, I was just a beginner in my practice of yoga, and this was a job which was quite demanding, but nevertheless, every now and then I had a little bit of break in my job. So for a period of 20 minutes, what I did usually, I had a book of Swami Shivananda. This was the first spiritual book that I've ever read. And I opened this book and I started reading it. And I had time to read only one chapter or something like this. But because this book was written by a yogi which was enlightened, the words and the energy which was projected behind these words was very powerful. I could say, looking back, this was probably one of the major elements which pushed me into the spiritual path. Even though I didn't have much time to practice yoga back then because of my job, or maybe because of my lack of willpower, nevertheless, staying every day, like reading every day for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, some of these inspiring words can put you on the right spiritual path until perhaps one day, you don't know what the future will bring, but perhaps one day, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, you will have the necessary amount of free time, budget, everything, to go and spend more hours of practicing yoga. And it started all from having this kind of spiritual spine that you have started by reading or listening to music or watching clips or whatever it was to help you and be on the spiritual path. And of course, the list could continue, because there are many things that you can do in your daily life which can help you in your spiritual practice, such as, why not, practicing tantric lovemaking. And this is something which we mention a lot in our Tantra courses, because tantric lovemaking can be done even in the evening after you have finished your work. If you have a partner, why not do it in the tantric way, have a lot of orgasms, sublime your energy, and you can do it like this. There is also the practice of karma yoga, which we mention our regular yoga courses, and the list could continue on and on. Perhaps even one day we will have a live event speaking more specifically about yoga in daily life, and then we can perhaps mention some other activities which one can do to boost your spiritual practice. The next question is coming from a person, I hope I pronounced this name correctly, Theo Charis. The question is, can you please, again, the focusing on eating, do you mean we focus on the taste of the food or the process of eating? Thank you. The answer is, it's not so much focusing, but it's more of an awareness. You can define it or describe it from your point of view as focusing, which will not be incorrect, but generally when we speak about this practice of mindfulness, being in the present moment, we're speaking more about awareness, and this would be more of a combination of both what you've mentioned here. That means you're focusing or you're being aware both on the eating and on the taste of the food. And one of the ways of which will help you to focus or be aware of doing these two actions at the same time will be closing your eyes. Because if I, for example, let's say now I have a delicious piece of chocolate cake in front of my eyes, then I take a fork and I put it in my mouth. But if my eyes are open, there are all kinds of things in the environment around me which can distract me while I'm eating and enjoying the taste of the food. but to help me interiorize and enjoy better and be aware of both of the process of eating and enjoying the experience of the taste of the food, I am closing my eyes. And when I put this delicious chocolate cake inside my mouth, I'm closing my mouth, and I'm doing it a little bit like a kind of a meditation. When you do meditation, you do things slowly, not fast. You do things slowly with full awareness and attention. So that means that when it's like I'm shifting into slow motion, it's like I'm putting this chocolate cake, and even when I'm putting it, I'm not just putting it quickly inside my mouth, but I'm slowly putting it inside my mouth. And then I'm closing my eyes. So like this, I'm not disturbed or distracted by anything around me. And then I simply start chewing it slowly. And when I'm chewing it, again, I'm doing it slowly, step by step. And at the same time, while I'm chewing it, I'm keeping my awareness, my attention of the taste of the food. This can become an orgasmic experience. This can actually lead you to a state of samadhi. If you don't believe me, try to look at the Japanese spiritual angle of things, in which they describe a certain exercise which is called the tea ritual. What is the tea ritual or the tea ceremony? The tea ceremony is this kind of a ceremony in which you need to prepare tea, but you need to prepare it in full attention, in full awareness. And they say by participating in such a ritual, it can take you into a high state of consciousness. And some of you will ask, what's the big deal of preparing a tea? Because it's something which is very, superficial. It takes 5 minutes or something like that. Yes, it takes 5 minutes if you're not doing it with full attention and awareness. Because usually when people make tea, they take the water, they put it in the boiler, then whenever it's finishing, they put it in the cup, they mix it, and then you have your tea. Where was your mind during all this process? Taka, 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 taka. Different directions. You thought about yesterday, what will happen tomorrow. But in the tea ritual, you are not supposed to allow your mind to be like a wild puppy. You are supposed to be fully attentive, fully aware, and the tea ritual is supposed to take something like 1 hour and a half, because you are supposed to do it in super slow motion with full awareness and full attention. And then indeed, even the experience or the process of preparing a tea can become orgasmic. It can become spiritual. It's the same thing with eating food. When you eat food, either it's a chocolate cake or something else, if you do it with attention, if you do it with awareness, it can become a very blissful spiritual experience. Let's see the next question here. I'll let it be the last question for today, because I see it's already after 8. And the question comes from John. And the question is, what is the name of the book that you mentioned you were reading when you started doing yoga? The name of the book was called Sadhana. Sadhana is the word which is described by the yogis for spiritual practice. So for example, when the yogis say, today I did my practice, they don't simply say practice, but they would use the word sadhana. They say, today I did my sadhana, which consists in whatever, doing hatha yoga, doing meditation, and stuff like this. So this was the title of the book, called Sadhana. I would just like to warn you, because this Swami Shivananda was indeed the brilliant, enlightened being, and I love the books of Shivananda because they inspired me a lot. He's a very practical, pragmatic type of yogi. That means he's not dwelling too much in philosophy, but he's just speaking from the heart and giving advice to people how to progress in their life. But nevertheless, the books of Shivananda, because he is coming from a bit more of this Vedantic, Hinduistic type of approach, he sometimes mixes there some words which are coming more from this Indian terminology, which might be a little bit confusing. But usually in the books of Shivananda, in the end of the book, you find the kind of a dictionary which gives like explanation to some of these phrases. So you can always flip to the last pages, and then you will see the definition of some of these words. It's not such a big deal. I got used to it, and I thought and I found that these books were very, very inspiring. Okay, so this was the last question, and it's about time to conclude for today. So I hope that you have enjoyed this live event. I hope that it gave you something to think about. And my advice is indeed, start with something. Again, you don't have to wake up tomorrow morning and tell to yourself, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this. No, you can just choose one of the things which I mentioned. Like, start with something easy. If you start with something easy, then gradually you can increase the level of difficulty, just like when you work on a muscle. If you work on a muscle, you don't want to start lifting 50 kilos. You want to start lifting maybe 5 kilos. That is your starting point. So choose one of these exercises which I've mentioned. Read the books that I've mentioned. Either it is the Eckhart Tolle book or The Power of Your Subconscious Mind of Joseph Murphy. Choose something simple. It can be even just a 5 minutes daily exercise, like spending time under the sun or reading some kind of spiritual chapter of some sort, and you're going to see that it is going to put you in the right path. And this is something very important, especially if you are living in a city or in a place in which you are not surrounded by yogis, you are not surrounded by some spiritual people. But nevertheless, if you can find some 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day to read some inspiring chapter, watch an inspiring clip or something, it can keep you in the right direction until one day you're going to see it's going to increase more and more, and then you would be able to increase or cultivate more happiness, contentment, and everything related to this. So thank you very much for joining and participating in this event. I wish you all a pleasant evening, a pleasant weekend, and see you in the future. Bye-bye.